The BeautyVoyage podcast is here for beauty professionals, multi-passionate, entrepreneurial-minded, and interdisciplinary artists. We know you, we see you, and we love you. BeautyVoyage is here to expand beauty education. We're sourcing information from different industries in order to support, inspire, and create community that cares for beauty professionals. We're here to propel you forward, integrating your passions and your desires into your beauty business. Hello, Hairtarians and BeautyVoyage podcast. It's Mary Alice, your host. And today, I'm so excited to introduce you to Guyn. She is an operations strategist and a team expert. And as you all know, in the beauty industry, the team and co-working element is very important, since our businesses are built on relationships and we deal with relationships all day. This element is incredibly important to understand and to always be working on and learning more about. So we've brought Ray in to help teach us about this and help us think about it in new ways, and just bring more, I think, presence and awareness to the subject. Helps us to really create spaces that we enjoy, and work relationships that we enjoy too. So thank you for being here, Ray.
Well, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So you are basically Superwoman. Operations strategist and team expert is like, what business owner wouldn't be like, I need you?
Well, that is so nice. And I received that beautiful compliment from you. And I love what I do. I love working with creative business owners who want the support, have the support already, and just need to figure out a way of making their teams and their kind of business operations feel like good to them and not like a struggle on a day-to-day basis.
Yes. And there's so much room for improvement in beauty. You and I were just sort of talking about the interesting dynamics that happen in these, suite spaces, and then there's commission spaces, and there's just so many different types of environments in beauty. And there's also this clash of the old way of how things are, and then there's a new sort of way of being in the world that's happening. So there's not a lot of consistency as far as I think in a lot of different professional environments, there's typical rules, or there's typical understandings of this is professional, this is not professional. And especially in the beauty spaces, we are alternative companies, we're alternative providers. So a lot of things that aren't professional, like cussing or wearing certain clothes, or that's part of being an artistic, abstract business. And it can also create very blurry lines as far as team and boundaries and rules for maintaining the space and the culture. So
yeah, that's such a thing. Thank you for that context too. I've been in the chair in salons many times in my life, but I haven't worked in a salon. And but we were just discussing kind of the unique opportunities and potentially challenges of that environment, and I'm excited to dive in and talk more about that with you.
Yeah, and I mean, it's there are so many pros and cons of each type of space, having there's this whole suite movement where people have been having their own little small tiny business spaces, and being able to kind of reclaim the culture of their specific small business by having a sweet salon and having like a specific decor and having like more control over the way that their business sounds and feels and operates. And then there's still plenty of shared spaces, and it's just it's too hard to like go into each one of those, but I want, regardless of wherever our listeners are at, I know that it always comes back to like some foundational tools, which you've taught me a bit about in the past. So let's just talk about like the foundations of team and like intentional building. Like, how do you identify, like, what are some good steps of creating a good culture from scratch?
Great question. Yeah, I love that. I love that framing. So, for me, the first and most important thing about creating a really amazing team culture is authenticity. It's to determine what your authentic way of being in the world is, and to allow that to filter into everything about your team. So that's something that you would start thinking about even before you hire someone on your team, or before you think about the way that you even set up your space. Like, I really recommend trying to infuse as much of you as you can into your space, into your team, into the way you do your operations, set up your processes to like whatever it is that you need to like actually run your business. Because I believe that if you're not authentic in the way that you're doing your business, it starts to feel totally out of alignment for you, and it can end up making you feel like even like physically ill, which is what my experience was, and how I got into this work in the first place, was just being in environments that were just totally out of alignment, out of integrity. And then I ended up getting like actually like sick from that process. And so for me, authenticity is just like such an important thing. And what I'm really passionate about is creating a team culture that feels authentically like you. And like concretely, what I think that can start to look like as a small baby step is to think about what your core values are. So spend some time thinking about what's important to you. Think about past work experiences that you've had, past environments that haven't felt good, that have felt good, and start to just make a list of what you know are your core values, not just like your business side of things, but as a human being.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah. And I think, I mean, that's just like beneficial for your whole life. But I think people get hesitant because they're like, well, I'm building a salon for other people. It's not me, or like we're building a brand. And that there's maybe, it's not like it's going to take over, and it's like you're still separate, but those things are the guiding markers of how you're going to build this entity outside of yourself.
Absolutely. And every business and every person is different. So sometimes there are some people who just love the idea of like them being their business, like they are their brand. Some people like really want to keep it separate, and they want to keep their own kind of personal life separate from their business life. And that both are beautiful and should be honored. The most important thing is making sure that, for example, if you're someone that is not really into like a hustle culture, and like, you need a lot of rest and a lot of space to do that, to the best of your ability, don't build a business that requires you to be hustling all the time. Make sure you're building in some sort of structure for yourself to have that rest and relaxation, so that you do have the energy to do the spurts of work when you need to do it. So for me, it really does come down, there's some like practical applications to that. And it is definitely a spectrum. Some people will like, you are the business, and that is part of like how you want to do it. And then others, you might want to have it a little bit more separate.
Yeah. And can you give more examples of like how other people have built like bits of themselves into their processes? Like
yes, a moment, but I want to just comment on one of the other really amazing byproducts of having an authentic work culture and the authentic way that you do set up your business is the way that your clients end up feeling being in the business with you. So from a client experience perspective, you can really feel when someone's in alignment and in integrity. So when you're going through a process like of just being a client, buying a product, like getting your hair done, having the experience of like going through and purchasing a product, and you have the person who owns the business or the person you're interacting with, the team member you're interacting with, and they're like totally in alignment with every piece of how that product is set up. Everyone's kind of all in the whole concept of the humor. They feel that, and they're more attracted to it, because I firmly believe people are attracted to authenticity. You may not actually like necessarily be someone who's like really that into that, but if you see someone who's like clearly into their own thing, they're doing it their way, and they feel like they're totally like doing them, they love it, you're like, oh, that's a really cool person. Like, I may not be the same type of person, but I like that they are totally them. You know, it's such a clear like example of how a company has chosen a specific way of being and then allowed that to integrate. Like the other one that comes to mind for me is I often fly Alaska Airlines to see my family. And my experience with Alaska Airlines as a customer has always been like, oh, they're not going to be like, they're kind of no frills. Like they're not like the fanciest of all the airlines, but they're always going to take good care of me. And that is how I always feel. So I choose them intentionally because I know that their customer service is going to be better than anyone else's.
Yes. And I also love USAA's customer service. They have amazing customer service.
Yes. So like, it's interesting to think about that and like, think about like, okay, what are you going to prioritize? Because in the end, like when you're building your business, like you want to have like a way, and when you are having your kind of team culture and the way that you think about your business's culture, let's just say there's like no other people necessarily that you've like technically hired on your team, you still have a culture, like, and that culture is you, unless you are intentionally creating something different. But I think it's really important to just be aware of that and intentionally like think about like that and how that is like being portrayed in your work with your clients. So that would be like the first thing. And then I have some other pieces of core advice, which would be communicating with your like team members. So once you do hire a team member, communicate early and often. So having team meetings is one of my top recommendations. They don't have to be long, they can be kind of quick, but having a regular touch point with your team as a team, I think is super helpful. I often work with clients who have online businesses. So their teams are all online. And so if you're in an environment where you're not going to like actually be in person with someone all the time, it's particularly important because you don't necessarily feel part of that team, and having that opportunity to like sit, have a touch point, all talk about the same types of things, like the same topics every month or every week, or however often you decide to do the meeting, is a really effective way of making sure people know that their voice is heard, making sure that they know they're going to get information from whoever's leading the meeting. And also just to like, build relationships with your team. And as a leader, it gives you the opportunity to like intentionally sit down and reflect on whatever topics it is that you choose to talk about. So for me, one of my like favorite kind of equations or types of questions that I ask in these meetings is like, what went well, what didn't go well, like what can we learn from, and are you like waiting, like what are things like that you could problem solve on with other team members. So it doesn't have to be super complicated, but it is an opportunity for both team members and the team leader to just like take a moment, reflect, and then everyone can go about their own business and do their own thing.
Awesome. Yeah.
Really well into my next kind of like 2 points, which is like remembering that it's really all about your team. It's all about relationships. Like, they are people. And what I say is treat them like you treat a friend or someone that you feel have a deep amount of respect for. And there's a difference between like loving someone and respecting them. I think in a family environment, you can do like really like kind of not nice shit to your sister and they're still going to love you because they're your family. Whereas if you're talking about I think we're like the meanest, we're like the least respectful sometimes to the people we love the most. Which is, I don't know, that's a whole other topic. But in terms of like, when you're thinking about your team, like often I find when I am working with like leaders, they have this feeling of like not necessarily like knowing how to do the whole team thing right, quote unquote. They have this feeling like there's a specific formula they should be following, and that formula is something they don't know. And so they are hesitant to even hire anyone because they feel like they need the formula in order to do it correctly. And I am really on a mission to like demystify that formula and help people understand that we're just talking about relationships with people, and we're talking about you being authentic. And then the second piece of this, the other side, is boundaries. Setting good boundaries with your team and having them know their own boundaries as well, and communicating those. So I feel like that's where that's how this dovetails nicely into the family concept, is because with family, we often don't really have good boundaries. We don't start off with good boundaries. We should have good boundaries. Boundaries are amazing, but learning how to set those boundaries with your team and giving them the space so that they can also have their own boundaries. And then also knowing that they are just people that you're communicating with, and trying to communicate with them in an authentic way to you so that it still honors their boundaries. Of course, this is the crux and the meat and the hardest part of having a team. There's so much nuance here, and it all is super dependent on a specific situation with a specific person. But the core concept is pretty much the same across the board. Treat people like they're people that you deeply respect, set boundaries for yourself, and be clear about their boundaries as well.
And what does that look like in action? Is that part of like the weekly meetings, or
I would say a lot of the type of boundaries that you set happens at the beginning of your relationship with a new team member. So I think that expectations, which is my final piece of advice, setting clear expectations right up front about what your desires are for the team member, what the expectations of success are, what success looks like to you, like getting clear on that, and then being very clear to the team member what success looks like for them. And also understanding what their desires are from the working relationship. And I personally am a big fan of a good old contract. So when you're starting work with someone, having it written down on a piece of paper so that you both can reference back to it and have a good sense of like, okay, this is our agreement. This is what we agreed to doing. This is what we agreed to having you do. This is what we agreed to having me do. And then being able to reference back to that, not in like any kind of legal way. This is literally just like a place where you can concretely look back at and be like, okay, how are we doing on these things? And then when I said communicating early and often, it's team meetings. It's also one-on-ones. It's really just not being shy about saying when something isn't going well for you. And then that teaches your team member that they can say when something isn't going well for them. So, that's the boundary right there. So when you run up into a place where you're like, oh, like this didn't work. I didn't like the way that this person managed this particular project, or as they're going through the project, I'm noticing something, I want to make some shifts. It's being like honest in your communication, but also compassionate. So you don't want to necessarily be like honest and then be like unkind. You want to be honest, share your feedback, and then let them also have an opportunity to share their feedback, and them creating a team culture that allows them to communicate and allows you to communicate is like one of my favorite ways of making sure boundaries are expressed.
Yes, that is so important. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I was just saying the other day to a friend of mine that so many people have this idea that confrontation equals conflict.
Mm.
And especially in like artistic spaces. I was just watching this like design show the other day, and granted it was a like a reality TV show, but it was that they breed conflict, but it it was just so interesting to see like actually Beyonce was one of my kind of conflict gurus, because she's like, I'm not afraid of conflict. And
Mhm.
I and you can't be, if you want to build big things, if you want to involve multiple people, if you want to have vision, if you want to create your vision, like there's going to be conflict.
Mm.
And I love that you brought up contracts, because it's in the beauty industry, there have been really, it's been a really toxic experience for a lot of people, where people have been given like non-compete contracts, or they've said they've just been abused by these contracts that really aren't that were used to control people, and not actually the purpose of what a contract is to protect both people.
Mhm.
And so I think that there's a lot of people that are scared of things like that, because it's not common practice, and it's not something they're exposed to a lot in our industry. And so kind of reframing what those tools are really used for,
Mhm.
and that they're accountability tools and that they're clarifying tools. I think that's super important.
Such a good thing to bring up. And I feel like what I also gathered from that and was thinking about as you were talking is, this is like revolutionary work, doing team in a totally different way than what the industry has said you should do it, or
Mhm.
than how the
Mhm.
industry has said you should do it, and also maybe even your own experience of how you've been part of a team. It's
Mhm.
totally different,
We're in
and
a
I think that's a
completely
good
new
thing.
It is. We're in a completely new time. And
Mhm.
people are, I mean, even just like currently today, of like people are rethinking after the pandemic, new ways of working, they have new values. So it's incredibly important to be always reassessing those things. But
Mhm.
your tip of communicating early and often is just incredibly important. And can we give people like a little lesson on like how they can implement that as a part of their system? I know you said
Yeah.
meetings were one way.
Yeah. So first of all, I would say like make sure you have a way that the person can communicate with you. So if you're working with someone within like your same physical space, being clear about like good times and good ways for the person to communicate with you. So if it's like literally a conversation that you want to be having in person with people, and like that's your best way of communication, then be like, okay, maybe you have like, I don't know, over lunch you have like a 15-minute 30-minute time when you're always going to be in a specific spot. You'll be taking your lunch, and you have like an open door policy where the team can come and like talk about like a question or something like that. And or people could maybe sign up in advance. I'm not really sure exactly, but it would be some
Mm,
sort of like actual structure physically in person to talk to you.
mm,
um the other option is, which a lot of, like I said, a lot of my clients work in the online space, so it's to have like a platform that you're using for communication. So if you have someone on your team that isn't physically in the same place as you, make sure they know like when and where to be communicating. Like that is important, because in the absence of some sort of guidance, people are just going to blow up whatever platform they know they can access you with. And that ends up feeling really overwhelming. And then you as a leader are not in like a centered, grounded place responding to them. This is a boundary. This is what a boundary would be. Giving them and setting the expectation. You're like, I will respond within these hours. And I'll respond within like, I don't know, 24 business hours or something like that, or 48 to your request. And then having a time and space to actually like have that conversation so that they know that they will be heard at some point, but your boundaries around like when you can best receive that information are also upheld.
That is super helpful. And I think it's important because a lot of people in our work, they may work in the same space, like not a lot of remote experiences, but they definitely might not be in the salon on the same days. So they might not see like one of their employees that only works a certain day of the week. They might not see that person for like a month at a time, you know? So a lot can happen in not having consistent communication or just not knowing what that person's experience is like. And or you know, if something happened with other people in the space or whatever it is, there's just a lot of room for variables. So I love that idea of like, this is where we professionally communicate, because otherwise, like you said, other platforms, it's like if they have your personal Facebook, then it's starting to merge and become less held in a professional container.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I would say is check yourself and your own feelings about what your team member is saying before you respond. So give yourself a moment to, and as you're setting up this, whatever communication agreement you have with your team, make sure there's enough space for you to like, try to bring your best foot forward. Of course, I really do believe that you should be able to be a human in your own business. So like, and your team should be able to be human as well. So people always have feelings when someone's saying something maybe a little bit more challenging, but allow yourself to like take a beat, take a pause, allow your team member to take a beat, take a pause, so that when you're coming together, you know that whatever you're handling is something that's like, it is truly about whatever is happening in the business. It's not something personal from your own life or something you're projecting onto this team member and their problem.
Mindfulness is always going to help resolve conflicts.
Absolutely. And like, you know, there's of course like a little bit of tension in the sense of like, as you're thinking and checking yourself, like remember that a lot of people, not everyone, I certainly am in the category of people who don't love conflict, but a lot of people are conflict averse. And so particularly if they're worried, like a team member might be like worried about their job or people are trained, we're trained in like a toxic workplace, like way of doing things. And so as you're thinking about even just like responding, making sure that you're not just avoiding you're avoiding it because you don't want to have the conflict, or if you're a team member and you're listening to this, you're like deciding you don't want to actually say something because you don't want to like lose your job or whatever, like being brave and being honest, but also just being sure that it's like, you know, what you're holding yourself responsible for in the actual scenario, and then what you're like hoping could be resolved as well.
Yeah. And I love when people use the word challenge, because it means that it's already something that's being solved.
Yeah.
And that it's not like this dead end, you know? So it's like, oh, I'm having this challenge. How can we, you know, what do we need to look at? And it already kind of softens things. So even language of like how you choose to talk about conflict, conflict subjects, and even teach people how to be in conflict, resolving together. Like repairing is just such an important part of team spaces.
Totally. And that's something you can even weave into your team meeting structure. So, like, the more you can normalize that conversations are safe to be had in this environment, like adding it as like part of like what you're talking about regularly is like where, like, what's like a hard thing that came up this week that you want to share or something like
Mhm.
that. And then the team really knows like right off the bat that they're like every week they're going to be asked that question. So, and they're going to see other people on the team saying that out loud as well, including the leader of the team. So I think it just, there's a lot of ways as you build kind of simple structures to allow people to really start to feel held and heard.
Team meetings and our team spaces do look different, but when you can speak with people about challenges, or you can say the example that you just gave, what was something challenging, what that does is it also like it helps people feel like they have a sense of camaraderie so that they feel like they're not in it alone. And
Mhm.
even if it's just with their personal business and everyone else is also an individual business, like those things still create longevity, and they're still important for like the health of the everyone's collective businesses to be able to grow and flourish and to like support each other. So even if it's not, I think sometimes people forget that and they totally miss that, and they're like, well, we don't need to have team meetings because we're not a team, because we all do our own thing. And it's like there's so much more to being a team than having one, like generating one income.
Absolutely. I love that point. I think it's so important to see team everywhere and to be able to like recognize like when I think honestly, just to even bring it even more broadly, like in our culture, there we spend so much time on our phones and kind of siloed in our own little worlds. Like we can all benefit from more collaboration and collaborative like spaces to like physically meet with other people, hear their challenges, and learn from each other.
Mhm. And the more that we practice these professional experiences within our teams, the easier and the more intuitively it comes to us to replicate these professional relationships with our clients, and then also just like with ourselves. And the practices that you learn from a team are still applicable in our families and in romantic relationships and friendships. Like all these things that we talked about: defining your core values, communicating early and often, setting boundaries, being clear about your boundaries, setting clear expectations, um, putting contracts in place or using contracts. And I mean, even in like friendships, those are like sacred agreements. And
Totally.
checking yourself and checking in with your own feelings to be clear about what's going on for you. All of those things are applicable in all parts of our life. And so I really love this idea of like seeing team as like this gift that we get to have that helps grow us. It's like having a built-in coach.
Mhm.
Having seeing
Absolutely.
your teammates as your built-in coaches to and your individual businesses.
That's beautiful. Such a great summary.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time and for educating us. I know that there's just so much we can always learn from you, and I know I will keep learning from you. So we'll talk again soon. But thank you for being on today. And how can people find you?
Well, I'm most active on Facebook, so you can add me there, but you can also find me on my website, raygwyn.com.
Well, thank you so much. And yeah, if anyone wants to reach out to hire you to help create these dynamics and teach them more specifically in their environments, they'll check out your website and hopefully connect.
Thank you so much, Mary Alice.